Welcome to the Young Crone's Cafe, where you can get a magic brew full of all sorts of information, both witchy and practical.
Grab a cup of coffee and join us. I'm Elizabeth, a wordsmith.
And I'm Dave, a modern-day sage.
We are going to talk about various witchcraft and life topics from a slightly more mature perspective, at least most of the time.
Thanks for joining us. On the Path, which is the name for our personal witchcraft practices, we have spent a great deal of time discussing what we believe and why. These conversations led to the writing of a book full of information about our tradition. We call these beliefs metaphysical kernels of thought because they are the start of much, much bigger ideas. We thought we would share some of these with you. So,
today's metaphysical kernel of thought is Dark Nights of the Moon. The Dark Nights of the Moon is the 3-day period between the waning and new moon. Many feel it is an inappropriate time for ritual and or magic. We do not think this way, and it may be a holdover from being uncomfortable with full darkness that our ancestors experienced rather than issues with using it as a magical time. Think about ancient peoples who watched the skies and saw the moon disappear, and how frightening this must have been for cultures so dependent on the moon for timekeeping. Then down through history, witches have developed the reputation of sneaking around in the dead of night up to no good. On the Path, we are taking back this time of darkness as something that is positive. Thinking about what creates these dark nights, it is actually the moon itself with its hidden energies associated with the dark. The moon is still there in the sky. It is just our perspective of viewing it from the earth that makes it seem to disappear or become invisible to us. When we started to think about the possibilities available when we looked at the darkness in a new way, we began performing rituals that are less energetic and more introspective. We have learned that these dark nights of the moon energy is introspective, incubating, and divinatory. It is a good time to start plans or come up with ideas that you want to manifest during the upcoming moon cycle. It is also a good time to take stock of where you are in your practice in the present moment. We have also found that it is an excellent time for divination for the upcoming month. The rituals we perform at the dark moon are frequently simpler in keeping with the hindered energies involved. Often, they just involve an acknowledgement of the start of another moon cycle. Lots of groups, people, authors who are witchy, pagan, will say, don't do anything in the dark nights of the moon. The moon is right, of course, leave it alone. That was a little pushy, I guess is a better word. And we started looking at why.
Right, yep. Because I remember the first time I started practicing with other pagans, and at the time I was a seeker / solitary, like an awful lot of people. I had sort of been doing my own new moon stuff, or blank moon is what I called it. And when I first started to work with some other people, they were all like, "Yeah, no, we don't do magic then. We don't do ritual then and stuff like that." And I thought it was odd that in their tradition they didn't, but I continued to do it myself just as my own sort of add-on to it.
Well, Sue and I both came from a more Wiccan background initially, which is where a lot of people get their start, and I don't knock it because it gives you a lot of foundational stuff that you can play with.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think everybody needs to start somewhere with some structure when they suddenly decide that, I want to be a witch as opposed to something else. It seems to make the transition a little easier emotionally for a lot of people. But as we got deeper and deeper into working with energies, I just want to kind of pivot back quick. You were talking about the why and where that didn't seem to feel right for you and Sue. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's where I was going. The idea is, okay, as a species, when you get back far enough, you got everybody watching the moon because it was a way to keep track of time. That's what you had. And all of a sudden, we didn't have the astronomical knowledge that the moon didn't leave.
Right.
It's gone forever. It's going to come back 3 days from now, kind of thing. And
Sure.
how terrifying that memory must be, and that give that primitive brain that we all have.
Sure. Yeah. It's true that even the animals and wildlife in nature alter their behavior patterns during those 3 nights. Absolutely. It's a biological fact.
It's a biological thing. So once we get past that biological knee-jerk reaction, and then you think about the past where witches had a reputation, shall we say, of being nefarious, and you're sneaking around in the dark, and thieves and murderers sneak around in the dark, so you don't want to be out in the dark. Kind of.
Well, and that's, you can almost call it the modern news spin on it, because the fact of the matter is people were sneaking around every night, but the only ones that got talked about were the ones that were sneaking around on the dark nights, and it turned into, just like we had talked about before with light, or dark and light, or absence of light and fullness of light, somehow turned into good versus evil, and we know how that somehow worked.
Well, yes, we do, but we'll leave that one alone. But
yeah,
we decided, okay, for us, we're going to see what the energy feels like, because that's a big focus of our practice is how do we experience the different natural energies, for want of a better word, available to us. And the Dark Nights has its own kind of energy.
Absolutely. I mean, even like I say, myself as a solitary, I knew that there was something. Sorry to overuse the trite word, but I knew there was something magical about that period of time. There was something special there.
Well, there is. It's much more receptively based energies. Self-knowledge and thinking up new plans. And we have found that we do some of our best divination at the dark nights of the moon, which I suppose we should define.
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, so good catch. Let's have a walkthrough of what it means when we say dark nights of the moon.
Okay, well, if you look at the traditional quote unquote full moon in witchcraft practice, it's that 3-day period where technically the middle of that 3 days is the actual full moon, but what we see in the sky for those 3 days, we can't perceive with our eyes any difference pretty much in fullness.
Sure. Almost so close to almost full that you really can't tell the difference, then full, then so close to almost full that you really can't tell the difference is those 3 days. Yeah,
exactly. So if you think about it, technically that first day of that 3-day full moon period is the end of the waxing cycle that
we've come through since the
the last night, dark side of the moon. Yes,
right.
Yep. Full moon. Then that next day, that third day of that 3-day period, is actually the start of the waning cycle.
Right.
Now, fast forward about 2 weeks, and you have that 3-day dark nights of the moon period where it appears the same in the sky to our perception, visual perception. But that first day is actually the end of the waning cycle. Then you have the actual dark nights of the moon day, which a lot of apps list as the official new moon. And then the third day is then the first day of the waxing cycle.
Understood. Yep.
So you have that
I used to refer to that 3-day period just in my own slang as the sliver moon.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's a sliver one night, it's gone the next night, and then it's a sliver the third night. But for the model that I use to perceive the energy and whatnot, that worked perfectly for me. And it's neat to notice that I came up with something completely separate and different than you and Susie coming up with something, but they are so aligned that it really sort of confirms that, yes, objectively there's something there that as a human animal we are observing, and it's a common observation.
Yes, it is. And not just a common observation, but when you think about it, a lot of stuff in witchcraft is what people call UPG, unconfirmed personal gnosis.
Sure. Yep.
And you have two people who are very different and have come from very different approaches to witchcraft, like you and I have. To come up with something very similar is kind of a neat confirmation, a little bit of.
Well, it's almost. I was never big into statistics, but it's almost like a double-blind test kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Like a scientific experiment when you think about it. And the other piece is we are not the only people out there who have noticed that over the years.
Oh, sure.
And that's one of the best parts I think about practicing witchcraft is finding those commonalities between you and somebody else or another group or whatever. And you have enough commonalities that you can talk about stuff and enough things that make it individually yours that makes
right. So you were telling me about the stuff that you do with the different energy of the dark nights of the moon.
Yes, exactly. We consider it's a good time to brainstorm because it's quiet. The energy is very mute. It's not muted, but it's actually stronger. Those receptive energies, because for us it has to become known through the dark. It's not like you have a light.
Okay.
The way it's kind of that hidden pieces of receptive energy.
Sure.
It's stronger and it's very introspective. It's a pause because the darkness kind of makes you settle and sit with self.
Sure.
So that it's a good time, like I said, for brainstorming things you might want to focus on for the next moon cycle.
Sure. And
whatever moon it's going to be.
And this is just another case of you and I found our way to the same thing from such a vastly different background.
Oh, yeah.
Simply because if I can just kind of give you my model for a moment.
Please do.
All of the energy in our local system, all of the actual real radiant energy as opposed to metaphysical energy,
yep,
from me has always been around the sun.
Okay.
So every time I look at a full moon, I am seeing the maximum reflection of the sun,
yes,
and feeling that. Now, if you also suppose that the sun's rays going out from the sun are like this universal music or sound or what have you,
okay,
you are always feeling or hearing the sun in one way or another, except during those 3 nights when, because physically, almost like an eclipse, because physically you're behind the planet, you look at the moon without the noise of the sun. You're sort of that quiet place or that calm place behind the rock in any stream.
yes.
You're in that little spot. There's no eddy. There's no flow. The water is just there, and often there's a frog in that spot. And some people say fairies, but that depends on what you believe. But here again, during those dark nights of the moon is the time that I've always seen myself as sort of sitting behind that rock, watching the music wash off in the sides of my periphery, and understanding that the moon at that moment is mine to look at without being lit by the sun.
Yes,
that's where I got all of my real introspection is. This is the one night that I can sit with the moon out of the sun's way.
Which makes a great deal of sense when you put it like that. As I said, it's a very introspective kind of feeling, and the energy tends to be more focused on personal stuff as opposed to the full moon is all about being out there and celebrating and energy and so on. And usually if you're working with a group, the group meets on the full moon. So there's that group work and that group energy and there's a celebration-ish atmosphere. And the dark night moon, even if you are working with someone else, tends to be more solitary.
Well, and I just got to look back a week and a half to realize that the last moon cycle, you and I greeted each other and talked at both quarters. We did ritual on the full moon.